In the summer of 1976, a mysterious illness suddenly struck two towns in Central Africa, one in South Sudan and the other in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Together, this illness killed 280 people. It was soon discovered that a new virus had caused these outbreaks. This virus would be named after the nearby Ebola River. Since then, the virus has caused several minor outbreaks, all of which occurred within Africa, and eventually led up to the infamous outbreak of 2014, in which the virus claimed the lives of more than 11,000 people, which was actually more deaths than all the previous outbreaks combined. As mentioned before, Ebola is a virus. A virus is a very small particle, a little bit of genetic information in the form of RNA or DNA, and a few proteins, all contained in a tiny vessel. A virus cannot act on its own and actually requires hosts like us in order to replicate and survive. So, what makes Ebola so dangerous? How is this tiny little virus able to overcome our body's complex immune systems so quickly and so effectively? Let's take a look at what Ebola is able to do. Once the virus has entered the body, its early targets are immune cells that are known as dendritic cells. Dendritic cells normally act as the first line of defense against any viral infection, but in the case of Ebola, these very protective cells get infected. Dendritic cells display specific signals on their surfaces that activate T cells. T cells are white blood cells that can identify and selectively kill any cells in our bodies that have been infected by a virus. In other words, they are professional virus killers. Because our dendritic cells have been infected by the Ebola virus, they are no longer able to activate our T cells, and as a result, our body can no longer mount an immune response against the virus. Now that the virus can spread throughout the body unhindered, it can infect another type of immune cell called the macrophage. Once infected, the virus is able to manipulate the macrophages to tell the cells in our blood vessels to release huge amounts of fluid into the body. This leads to internal bleeding. At the same time, the virus begins to infect our liver cells, our adrenal cells, and our GI tract, leading to more damage to the blood vessels and even more fluid loss. All of these things are going on at the same time all over the body. More and more fluid leaves the bloodstream. Blood begins to come out of every opening of the body. You become very dehydrated and your organs aren't being supplied with enough blood and begin to fail. Eventually, the cascade of these events leads to death. In fact, 68% of people infected with Ebola don't make it out. So, Ebola sounds pretty scary, doesn't it? You're probably worried, and I don't blame you. It is an extremely dangerous virus. But, there is one thing you haven't been told. Although Ebola is extremely infectious, it is not extremely contagious. This is quite an important distinction, because unlike other contagious viruses, Ebola is not transmitted through the air. For example, influenza is spread via airborne viral particles that are dislodged in sneezes and coughs. This kind of transmission makes influenza one of the most contagious viruses out there, and is why we see so many people around us infected with it every year. Ebola, on the other hand, is only spread within human populations through direct contact with the bodily fluids like blood, urine, feces, or even saliva of an infected individual. You're probably wondering, hey, if Ebola isn't infectious and not easily spread, then why was there such a huge outbreak in 2014? In 2014, the virus had spread between countries in West Africa, starting in Guinea and then hitting Sierra Leone and Liberia. For the past 4 decades prior to 2014, outbreaks had only occurred in countries located in Equatorial Africa, like Uganda, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Sudan. Though such equatorial countries also have weak healthcare systems, they know Ebola very well and were prepared for outbreaks as they had things like isolation wards and staff that were experienced with procedures for infection prevention and control. Contrastingly, West Africa was not prepared, and for this reason the 2014 outbreak was able to spread and do the damage that it did, not because it was a more pathogenic or contagious strain of the virus. So, by now you probably would have figured that the only situation that would warrant genuine concern is if you're planning on traveling to any high-risk areas, such as countries that are located in Central Africa. In that case, you'd probably want to take all the necessary sanitary precautions. It's important to take such precautions because to date, no Ebola-specific therapy has achieved regulatory approval for use in humans, and as a result, supportive care still remains the mainstay of treatment. However, researchers have been working hard these past few years and have created a vaccine for the Ebola virus. It is currently still in the process of going through human clinical trials, but shows great promise, and researchers are very optimistic about its effectiveness. So remember, although Ebola is one of the deadliest viruses out there, the chances of it reaching you are very slim. Thanks for watching. If you like what you just saw, be sure to give us a like and subscribe to the Demystifying Medicine channel for more.